Hi everyone, so in today's video, I'm going to be discussing my writing weaknesses and 6 ways I combat them. So I believe that an integral part of becoming a better writer is being able to identify your weaknesses so you can actively work on them. This video is not a catch-all. I'm sure I have other writing weaknesses, but these are just certain things that I've noticed in my writing as of late. I made a similar video to this in first year called Problems I'm Having with Writing. I will link it in the description, where I essentially covered some issues I was also noticing in my work. Today's video is going to cover 6 different weaknesses, so let's jump right into it. So my first writing weakness is world building. I am really bad at world building. Honestly, I really struggle to ground myself in the worlds of my stories. In general, worlds are really overwhelming to me, which means I feel quite unstable while world building. But for how my brain works, world building doesn't tend to be predictable or intuitive for me because I don't have 100% of knowledge about this particular world. At the same time, I struggle to brainstorm the rules and regulations of a certain world, and that even applies if I'm writing a contemporary story. For example, when I'm world building Seventh Virtue, which is fantasy, which I don't usually write, I find that most of the time when I'm world building, I'm very overwhelmed. And that's because I feel uncomfortable when I don't have all the facts on something, but the problem is that I have to come up with the facts on that thing, and I don't know. So I definitely don't think world building is one of my strengths. So to combat my poor world building skills, I've started to underline or bold certain dialogue or narrative that contains important world building information. I'm also working on a reverse outline and a story Bible, which is going to take me forever to compile because, again, world building is very overwhelming to me, but those are just some steps to improving my world building skills. So another writing weakness of mine is consistency. I can't always easily keep track of ages, character names, or even plot strands, which means that most of the time my books have inconsistent patches throughout them, especially in the first draft. And eventually I have to revise those out. And this is why it's really important to my process that I draft as quickly as I possibly can, because my short-term memory isn't super great. So I kind of like to construct the story as quickly as possible so I don't forget a whole bunch of things. So a major way I try to combat my consistency issues is to write a lot in a short period of time. So for example, I like to write 5,000 words in a weekend if I know I won't be able to write for the next 2 or 3 weeks. And as a full-time student, I know that I usually won't be able to write for months on end. Writing a lot in a short period of time makes me feel engaged in the work. It creates consistency in that patch of work. It might still need some stitching between that patch of writing and the next one, but at the end of the day, it allows me to remember a lot more details and kind of progress into the plot in a more linear fashion because I can remember everything that occurred. I also like to reread at least a scene or two or even a chapter before I begin drafting, just to refresh my memory. So my next writing weakness is clarity. Clarity is really hard, and this was an issue I struggled with a lot when I was first trying to find my writing style in 2018. So what's different for me in 2022 in comparison to 2018 is that I don't usually have a whole bunch of clarity issues on the line level. It's not like every single sentence is very confusing like my old writing used to be. I definitely feel like I've come leaps and bounds away from that, and it's not really an issue for me on the line level. But a lack of clarity usually affects my themes. Sometimes I find that I paint themes a bit too subtextually in my work. And while I love subtext and think it's super underused and writers should really use it to fortify their work, and you can check out my video on subtext in the description, sometimes I paint in that subtext so subtly that even I don't understand what I meant. I think, however, that I'm relatively good at spotting this or intuitively feeling like I kind of miss the mark with the subtext, but sometimes I do miss it. And to combat my clarity issues, especially when it comes to theme, I like to ask someone else to read my work. Basically, I ask them what they think the theme was or what they think a particular passage was about. And usually this communication between me and the other person is kind of a hunt to see if the theme was painted in a bit too subtly. Usually this communication exists to see if the theme is too buried and if I need to spend more time tugging it out. And if you've been in a writing workshop, you've probably heard the term, just tug it out a bit more, which can be as helpful as it is frustrating. But genuinely, sometimes I do need to get that feedback because it is buried. The theme really needs to be grabbed and pulled out like a carrot. So my next writing weakness is plotting. So give me a second. Don't get mad at me. I know if you are a pantser, I am also a pantser too. I'm 100% ride or die pantser. I will never change my ways, no matter how many people judge me. I love pantsing, and I think it's such a fantastic writing process. And I'm such a proponent of choosing your own writing process. So if you like pantsing and pantsing works for you, like it does for me, then I would stick with it. I'm a proud pantser even. I've made so many videos on pantsing, which I will link in the description. But sometimes I would like to plot. I have been a pantser since I started writing. I have never been an outliner. I half outlined one of my novels, which was called I'm Disappointed. Everything that I outlined is not there anymore. It was just completely torn apart after I had to do revisions because the outlining process just didn't work for me. I personally struggle to link events together. I just posted a video on tips for pantsers that covers how to combat this a little bit, but I find it very confusing or disorienting to try to figure out what event leads to the next event. I also find that plotting usually dulls my work and makes it impossible to write beyond the notes. For those of you who think I haven't given it a fair shot, I used to write scene skeletons, which were literal just like outlines, or even like maybe you could call it a zero draft of each scene. So I had roadmaps and I found it was way too difficult. It kind of stripped away the life of the scene for me. And I wish that was not the case sometimes. I think it would really help me, especially in the department of consistency, because I'm a student who doesn't have a lot of time to write my work. It would help me keep track of all of the information and give me kind of a place to jump off. I just wish I could be better at plotting and actually sticking to plotting sometimes because, you know, sometimes I have a vision for something and I would like it to go down that path. Sometimes I do have ideas for scenes that never happen because I divert, and I love the diversions. I talked about that in the recent video I posted about pantsing. I think the diversions are so important. But sometimes I'd like to stick to the predetermined plot a little bit, but I'm not very good at it. To combat this, I have started reverse outlining. Reverse outlining is something I do for all of my projects in general, just because I have a very bad short-term memory, as we noted. And so I reverse outline out of necessity because I don't remember what my books are about. I don't know if that's strange, but I don't remember most of the things that I write. Fostered is like 9 books, and I probably remember like 1,000 words from the entire series. So reverse outlining really helps with that. Another thing I've been doing is note-taking. So this is something I've actually been doing since the start, and that's writing ideas down as they come to me. I have a video on how I organize my writing documents, and there I kind of show you how I organize my docs on my phone. I use my notes app on my iPhone a lot to take notes, and I always try to write them down before I forget them, because that's always the worst feeling in the entire world when you know you had an idea and you can't remember what it was. I don't know how else I can get better at outlining though, because I feel like I've tried it so many times. So if you're a die-hard outliner and you have advice for me, let me know, because sometimes I think it would be a useful tool. Even though I'm still a pantser and I will probably never leave pantsing, I do think it would be useful to learn how to stick to an outline a little bit better. My next writing weakness is developmental or large-scale edits. So I will say something. I am great at developmentally editing other people's work. I think I'm a good editor, and I think I understand when stories need structural or large-scale changes. But I struggle when it comes to implementing large-scale changes into my own work. And I know a lot of writers experience that. I find it overwhelming because it's difficult for me to be able to mentally dismantle my writing. I don't know if that's because I'm more of a visual person, that it's just too overwhelming to see a whole bunch of words and then realize I need to kind of break them apart. And granted, I haven't made that many developmental edits on novels. I have made developmental edits a couple of times on short stories, but it's why I don't really make content on developmental edits, because I don't know enough about it, honestly, to have a process that I feel comfortable sharing. But to combat my poor developmental editing skills, I have decided I love to give my work a lot of distance. I know a lot of people don't like doing this, but for me, this helps a lot because it distances me enough from my work that A, I forget it because I have a really bad short-term memory, and B, that it doesn't really feel like mine anymore, and I can kind of better zoom out and see its overall shape. So giving distance blurs the chapter for me in a sense. So instead of thinking of each individual scene or character or line, I like to think of the chapter's overall shape. What shape does it take? Literally, my brain sees a shape when it thinks of chapters. I don't think of words, I think of blocks. And so I kind of like to ask myself, what's missing here? Is it too top heavy? Are there holes? And so I kind of like to play into the visual brain that I have. But if you are a pro at developmental edits, or were once a very overwhelmed being when it came to developmental edits, and you have found a process, I need your tips, because developmental edits are not my friend. I always feel like I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm just gonna line edit. This is fine. And sometimes that works. Sometimes I just like get away with publishing my first drafts. I'm a big proponent of publishing your first drafts if you think they're ready to go. I've done it for several of my stories and that I love very much. I didn't need to developmentally edit them. But again, kind of like with the outlining thing, I think it's a really important skill, especially when it comes to novel writing, where that will inevitably happen. So my final writing weakness is characterization. I get a lot of messages of people saying that they love my characters and that they think I'm really good at characterization. And my secret that I'm going to expose is that I don't feel like I'm good at writing characters at all. And that's because 90% of my characters feel like strangers to me. Even if it doesn't read like that in the short story or the excerpts I post, even the characters closest to me feel like total strangers. I have no idea who they are. Again, I don't know if this is a neurodivergent thing, but I don't feel close to my characters. I don't feel like I can ever get into their heads. Even if I'm thinking of them right now, like they make me happy and I'm excited to write with them, but I just don't feel like I know them at all. I'm jealous, honestly, of the writers who know every little detail of their characters and know how they would react in a certain situation and how their mindset got to be the way it is, but I don't know most of the time. It's honestly kind of one of the insecurities I have about writing because I feel a bit behind other writers. I've been writing for almost 10 years and I still feel like most of the time I'm writing with strangers. I can't really tap into their heads on like a conscious level. I might be able to do it on a subconscious level, but I'm not consciously understanding who they are, which is a little bit sad to me, I think. So no matter how complexly they appear on the page, I get that compliment a lot and it means a lot to me. I just have no idea what I did to make them read so complexly. Really, my characters most of the time remain a mystery. So that's something I've been trying to work on. So to combat this, I have been trying to do some reverse character profiling. I've been doing that in Scrivener. I've also been trying out Campfire. One thing that's really important is especially noting kind of like backstory, at least what's relevant till when like the book or the story starts. But I don't characterize like my short story characters, for example. I just write the story and then I never think about them again. So I don't know how they ended up the way that they were. But with my novel characters in particular, I just feel like almost every single one of them is the same sometimes. But I don't see my characters' faces. I never see who they are. Like even the ones that I've drawn, I've only been able to draw them because it's been quite a while. But yeah, I don't see faces. So it's even difficult for me to differentiate from my characters, like kind of physically, even if they look very different, because I don't see their faces when I write. Characters are a total mystery for me. So that's my final writing weakness for this video. What are your writing weaknesses? I feel very vulnerable right now. I've just exposed my deepest, darkest secrets. But you know, these are things that I actively work on. I don't pretend that I'm an expert on everything when it comes to writing. I don't know everything. In these videos, I only bring knowledge to you that I feel I've thought quite a bit about. So if you ever wanted me to make a video on any of these topics, I'm probably not the right person. But if there are people who have tips and tricks for everybody, leave them in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in another one. Bye.